In today's video, we will be covering all things cash flow as it relates to residential real estate investing. What is it? How do you calculate it? Why is it so important? Hi, it's Sylvia with my Wealth Builders Realty out of beautiful Nampa, Idaho. If you are looking for a solid way to build wealth in an asset class that has been proven over and over, you have come to the right place. On this channel, we cover all things residential real estate investing. So today we are covering the mighty and powerful cash flow. As you can imagine, when it comes to building wealth, there are numerous ways to measure the viability of an investment vehicle. And one of the most popular ways to do that for real estate is cash flow. In its most basic form, cash flow refers to the money that you get to keep in your pocket after all the expenses that are associated with that property have been paid. Simple math equation, income minus expenses gives you cash flow. And to best illustrate what each of these words mean, we will be using a whiteboard a little later to do some math. We will analyze a property and determine if it cash flows or not. So let's start with our income definition. Income refers to all the money that you take in. Income sources can vary depending on the property that you buy. In most single-family properties, the income you generate from that property is typically the rent. Now, if you have something like a 2 to 4 unit, like a duplex, a triplex, a fourplex, there might be some other things that you can do to generate a little bit more income. For example, in some areas of downtown Nampa, you will find single-family homes that have been converted to a multifamily residence. And in those instances, you might have a couple other options for income. And in these types of properties, maybe you only have one garage. Well, who gets the garage? Probably the person that's willing to pay for it, right? It is not uncommon in this area to have apartment complexes that will charge anywhere from $50 to $70 for a garage. And what about laundry? Usually these types of buildings will not have a laundry facility. But what if you could put coin-operated washer and dryers, or even just one, in the garage that your tenants could use? Now your tenants don't have to leave the property to go and do their laundry. All right, let's move on to expenses. Expenses are everything that you have to pay for that property. These are the most common expenses, but please, when you are buying and you're looking at a specific area, please do your homework. There might be some expenses that I have not covered here because they're simply not common in Nampa, Idaho. So one of the first expenses that I always like to calculate in is debt, right? If you are buying a property, unless you are paying cash for it, chances are you're going to have some type of financing. So you want to make sure you're going to account for that mortgage payment. Most mortgage payments are PITI. So that's your principal, your interest, your taxes, and your insurance. If you have that all rolled up into your mortgage payment, that's called PITI. Now you also have operating expenses. These are the costs to run the property. Most cases you can pass these costs or some of these costs along to your tenant. So for example, utility bills, lawn maintenance, garbage cans. Now keep in mind in certain situations, like we were just talking about a converted fourplex. In that instance, let's just say that the previous owner didn't split the power for all the units. You might have one bill that's covering 2 units. How do you split that? So when you're looking at these possible investments, it's important to know what is split and what is not. Other costs are HOA fees or maybe even a property manager. Now, the next 3 expenses are usually ones that most new investors will not take into account when they're purchasing a property. And that's usually because they're not really expenses that are spent every single month. However, I would argue that these 3 expenses are crucial to your calculations. And not only should you calculate for them when you're purchasing the property, but they should be updated as you manage that property and you own that property long term. So what am I talking about? First one is vacancy rate. So vacancy rate refers to the amount of time that you will have your property vacant. Read, no money coming in. Now, why would you think that's important? I would love to tell you that once you get a tenant in, they will never move out. Or that if you get one tenant in and they're about to move out, that you will be able to get another tenant in the next day. Now, these are obviously goals that we should all strive for, and in other videos I will cover ways to minimize that vacancy rate. But still, It's not a perfect system, and chances are you're going to have your unit vacant at some point or another. Vacancy is calculated by taking the number of days that the property is vacant and dividing that by the number of days that you have it for rent. Multiply it by 100 to get your percentage rate. How do you calculate that when you haven't owned the property and you haven't run it for a year? Well, there are averages. As you can see, the vacancy rate can vary vastly depending on where you're renting a property. That being said, a good rule of thumb is 5 to 8%. But here's a tip. Please do not rush the screening process in hopes of lowering that vacancy rate. Take your time with the screening process. It's better to get the right tenant now to avoid another vacancy in the short run. So on to repairs and maintenance and capital expenditures. Very similar, but different. So first, capital expenditures, also known as CapEx. These are going to be your big expenses that you're probably planning for in the near future. So one of those might be a roof, HVAC system, or any other major project that you should plan for. If you know when you buy this property that it will need to be done, you probably want to account for that in your calculation. Now, repairs and maintenance, these happen intermittently. You might have months where there are no expenses, and you might have months where the faucet is leaking, a window won't latch, sprinkler is broken. So it's always a good rule of thumb to have these also accounted for in your monthly expenses. So how do you do that? There's also average rates for these, and they can vary. Normally, I tend to use an 8% rate for these. So what does all this look like in numbers? Let's do some math. All right, guys, I got my whiteboard here. Let's do some math. So let's say we're buying that beautiful converted fourplex that I showed you earlier. And they want $500,000 for that. I will apologize right now for my handwriting. Unfortunately, $500,000 purchase price. You're putting down 25%, which is $125,000, leaving you with $375,000 that you will finance at a 7.5%. Lucky you. So we are doing income minus expenses equals cash flow. That's what we're trying to find out. And not just any cash flow. We want positive cash flow. So first, we're going to look at income. Where's our money coming from? So first one, obvious. If you're doing your job and renting property, you're getting rents. So let's say in this example, we've got one unit renting for $1,250, one for $1,100, another for $1,100, and one for $850. So you add that up, your rents are $4,300 a month. Now, we saw a few pictures. Here they are again of the garages. Nothing fancy, but it still can use as storage, or if you want to put a car in there, it's awesome. So we're not going to charge you the $50, $70 that apartments are charging for brand new stuff, but let's say you get $30 a month. So $30 times 3, because there's 3 garages, and that brings you $90 a month. Then you decide, because you watched this video and you said laundry, that's a great idea. So you decide to put coin-operated laundry machines. So washer and dryer, I think I read somewhere average is $6.20. Let's say you do $2.50 each, bringing you to $5 per load. Most people do an average of, 5 loads a week, maybe for a family. We don't know who lives here, so we're just gonna say 3 loads. So $5 times 3 loads, and let's say there's 4 tenants, you're looking at $60. And that's probably conservative, to be honest. I mean, that's gonna vary depending on the month and what kind of laundry and all that good stuff. But let's stay with conservative numbers. If you make more money, awesome. If not, no worries. So we've got $450 total for your money coming in. Now, pretty cool, but what are our expenses? So the first one, of course, we have a mortgage, right? We didn't buy it 100% cash, so we have $375,000 amortized over 30 years at a 7.5%, which is gonna give you $2,622 principal and interest. Now, property taxes, obviously we have those. Let's say it's $3,400 a year divided by 12 is going to give you $284. Insurance is $1,200 per year, let's say, gives you $100 per month. Now, as I mentioned before, this is also PITI. Now, what other expenses? We have operating expenses, right? So all of that goes on to the tenants. So we're going to have 0 there. Then we have things like HOA. There is no HOA in this little old property, so 0. And of course, if you're going to hire a property manager, you should probably account for that expense. Let's say in my case, I've been doing this for a while, I'm going to manage the property myself. I'm not paying that. Now the next 3 expenses that most people don't account for. So what were they? We got vacancy rate, we got repairs and maintenance, and we got capital expenditures or CapEx. So vacancy rate, let's go with a good rule of thumb. So vacancy rate, 5% of this number is going to give you a whopping $222.50. So let's say you're smart and you get your inspection done, and anything that immediately needed to be done was taken care of by the seller. So you don't have any immediate repairs coming up. We go with the industry of 8%. So 8% of this amount right here, you're gonna have $156. All right, CapEx, definitely an older property. Let's just say this one does not have a new roof when you buy it, and so you need to kind of account for some of those expenses. So we're gonna go with 10%, really just based on the age of the property. It's a good number. So CapEx, 10%, $4,450 is gonna give you $445. All right, so we get those all added up, and we are looking at $4,029.50. These are your expenses, what you are spending to get this property. $4,450 is what you're making. That's your income minus your expenses. $4,029.50 gives you $420.50 per month. That is what you're making in positive per month. You multiply that by 12 to give you your yearly rate of $5,046 per year. And that is in the positive, my friend. You are having positive cash flow that's going into your pocket when you buy this property. So in this instance, you have a positive in your income column. You have cash flow. Now, what happens if any of these numbers changed and you found yourself with a negative number there? Does that make this a bad deal? Should you not invest? Well, that depends on your end goal and your specific financial situation. In general, nobody wants to supplement a property with their own income, but many people do. Why? Well, like I mentioned earlier, cash flow is only one of the units of measure for how a property performs. There are other ways. What are they? Well, that's a topic for another video. Stay tuned and we will cover all of that and more.